Before we get into the meditation, we know that today is the third Sunday of Advent, and we're going to light the candles. Advent can be looked at as a time of realizing that it's a great journey of being awakened into the spirit of Christ consciousness. And the first candle we're going to relight, and that's the candle in remembrance of faith. There we go. And the second candle we're going to relight for the candle of peace. And today's candle with the daily word is love. Now if we can all just take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and relax. And just think about being immersed in God's love. And think about the oneness of God. And just imagine God's love as a beautiful golden light coming down, filling you, filling your heart, filling your body, filling your mind with the divinity, with the oneness. And as you breathe slowly and deeply, and you feel, and you know that you are divine because divinity is flowing through you. And as you feel the divine energy flowing through you, you have a knowing and a realization that it not only flows through you, but it flows through the person sitting beside you. And it's connecting you two. And it's flowing through every one of us in the room, making us one. One connected with the divine energy of love. And that energy that's flowing is not only connecting us in this room, but it's connecting everyone in Myrtle Beach and in South Carolina and in the entire world. The divine energy flows through us, through friends and families, and even enemies. It's a divine energy, it's a oneness. It flows through the plants, and the trees, and the animals, and the insects. And that is love. So just feel it. Feel that connection to everything. And really know that we are all divine. And we are all filled with love. So as you breathe, open your eyes and look around. Look at the person sitting beside you. Look at someone maybe you don't know. And know that you are all connected with divine oneness. Good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Hi, Noah. Hi, you're right. Some of you don't know me, am I correct? Right. My name is Michael Harper, and I told Dee what my titles were, and I forgot to use them because I just graduated from Emerson Institute. Thank you. my first time speaking in public since I received my doctorate, so I'm a little bit nervous, but I can feel your love. And I'm really glad that that was the word for the day, because I needed it myself, and I'm sure if I needed it, other people needed it as well. So, let me get this. I have a really interesting, kind of strange title for my talk today. It's Finding God at P.F. Chang's. And that's where I work. So some of you may have seen me at P.F. Chang's. But I wanted to, first of all, tell Reverend Rob that I'm really thankful for the stain on your knee. Yes, because I was thinking about that. Your stain is equal to my nerves right now. Okay? You got this. And we got this. The stains don't matter. The nerves don't matter. Because we all love each other. And we're all filled with divinity. And these stains don't matter. So, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Where do I point this? There we go.
At her.
Pointed at you. Okay. So, I was raised in a Wesleyan church. Anybody ever heard of the Wesleyans? Okay. If Dee and I were talking this morning, she was raised Methodist, and I said, oh, I'm the fundamentalist cousin of the Methodists. We thought the Methodists were too liberal, so broke off and formed something else. And so from the time I was 2 years old, I was in church. And I had wonderful parents who really taught me a set of morals to live by, and I'm so thankful for them for that. But there was something that the preacher always said, and something that my parents said to me, that Jesus lived inside me. And when you're 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 and 15, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know if it made sense to you guys when you were young, but it didn't make any sense to me because nobody explained it to me. They just said, Jesus lives in you. And I'm like, where? and they would say, Jesus lives in your heart. And I looked at it as a metaphor. So if somebody loves me, they're in my heart. So that means I'm thinking about them. I feel a fondness toward them, and I feel a love toward them. But I didn't know what it meant to actually have God, because at that time, God was a person, an external person. And if he's an external person, how is he living in me? So I think it was at that point that I became a seeker. And I have sought all my life, and I've become an academic. You know, I got my bachelor's and my master's degrees in English, and I was a teacher for a long time. And I taught English in Japan for about 8 years. And I was seeking, I was looking. Every time I wasn't teaching, I was probably in the temples and the shrines of Japan. And I would see these people worshiping, ringing the bells, throwing in the coins, and standing in front of the Daibutsu, which is the big Buddha in Kamakura. Beautiful, by the way. And they felt it. And I felt their feeling, but I didn't feel it personally myself. It was up here. I knew it, but I still didn't know what it meant. And when I was in Japan, teaching English, feeling unsatisfied, I was doing something good for other people, but I wasn't being fed in return. Teaching English is important, and learning English is important for people in other countries because, you know, if you can speak English, your salary is going to be better, you're going to have more job opportunities. But I came to a point where I didn't care. If you learned English and you got a better job, that wasn't feeding me spiritually. And so I decided to start studying natural health. And I was introduced to Caroline Mace and Wayne Dyer. And this was before I was in spirituality at all, or so I thought. We'll get into that in a minute. But I read Caroline Mace's book, Anatomy of the Spirit. Mind-blowing, life-changing book. And then when I read Wayne Dyer's The Power of Intention, I'm like, what? My thoughts my beliefs change my reality, I thought God did that. And then I started thinking, okay, things are beginning to fall into place a little bit more. Things are beginning to make a little bit more sense. But then, because of this, I went through a phase of, if it's my own mind, if it's my thoughts, and if it's my beliefs doing it, there's no God. Because it's my thoughts doing it. And then I was introduced to Deepak Chopra. Anybody ever read him? Amazing. And Deepak Chopra really gets into the metaphysics of oneness. The one eternal entity that fills everything. I read something recently on Yahoo News, so I mean, take it for what it's worth. But, you know, if you look at any physical object through a strong enough, what's it called, microscope, I almost said telescope, yeah, that there is actually more in between space than there is form. And if you take away that empty space, you could take what's left of the physical form of everybody. Don't write a research book on this because I think I might be getting this quote wrong. But it's either every person in this country or every person in this world, and you put that physical mass that's left over, you put it together, it's like the size of a sugar cube. Because the in-between space, the emptiness has been taken away. To me, when I heard that for the first time, I think that clicked and I understood maybe that's what God is. The in-between space that connects us all. And it started making sense to me. But I was an English teacher, and then I left Japan and I went back to Florida where I lived for many years, teaching English at a university there, and then I became an academic advisor for the Saudi Arabian and the Chinese students. I was the advisor. They would come to me with problems, and I would help them through their problems and help them find jobs. Still unfulfilling. And by this point, I was reading lots of Deepak Chopra and lots of metaphysics, and I was getting into it a lot more. And then one night, I had a dream. And the school bus was in my dream, but I couldn't find a picture of a school bus full of kids with sad faces. So let's imagine those smiles aren't there, okay? But in the dream, I was on this school bus, and all of my colleagues at the university were on the same school bus. The bus stopped at an intersection, and we all got out. And imagine this is the intersection, the bus has stopped, and you have the road going that way and the other road going this way. This road was lit up perfectly. But I knew that I had to go this way, and I was so scared. And I asked one of my colleagues, hey, want to go get a coffee with me? I think there's a coffee shop down on this side of the road. And my colleague was like, no, coming up with excuses. I have things to do. I have papers to grade. I can't go with you. And I said, why do you always do that? Every time I ask for you to do something with me, you have an excuse. And that colleague looked at me in the eyes and said, because what you have to do it alone. And I looked at the dark road, and I said, okay, let's go. Let's do this. And I was terrified, and I started walking. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. But as I walked a little bit, I could tell that there were homeless people sitting on the side of the road, grabbing at my leg. And I was scared, and I kept trying to go, and I kept trying to move a little bit more. And finally, I looked at one of them and said, I see you. I understand you. I feel you. And they all disappeared. Yeah, crazy. And then I kept walking, and I kept walking, and when I got to the end of the road, you know how dreams are. You just know things that don't make any sense. But I'm on a road, and I knew to just reach up and flip on the light switch. And I flipped it on, and I woke up. And it was morning. It was 5:30. It was time for me to get ready to go to work because I had an hour's commute on the interstate. I had to get up early. But I went to work that day, and I gave my notice. I said, I'm quitting in a month. And my boss was like, what? What are you doing? Because I have been doing this career for 22 years. And I said, I'm moving to Myrtle Beach. And she's like, that's awesome. Do you have a job? And I said, nope. She's like, you are quitting your job? You're quitting your career? And you're going to a place without a job? And I said, yeah, it's so exciting, isn't it? And she's like, you're crazy. But does anybody remember, well, I'm sure you do, Reverend Mari, Darlene, Gwen? Yeah, of course, of course. Hi, Reverend Mari. She says she's going to be watching me. I had met her by this point, and she told me that she was studying at Emerson Institute, working on her degree. And she started telling me what it was and what it was about. I had never heard of New Thought before. I had never even heard of Unity before. Yeah, remember, I came from a Wesleyan church. And so she explained it to me, and I'm like, oh my God, really? That makes total sense to me. And it made sense here, but I felt it here. And it was fantastic. And that was the start of a big journey. And P.F. Chang's was one of my favorite places to eat. Did anybody ever eat in there?
Yes.
Good. Come see me. I'm still there. But I love the food at P.F. Chang's. And so I was here, and I knew that I wanted to get a job working in a restaurant as a server. I didn't care that I had 22 years and a master's degree. That's not my point anymore. The point was I'm working on my doctorate. I need just income and free time. And so I saw there was a P.F. Chang's when I was out driving around job hunting. I went in to have lunch and walked out with a job. And it was so awesome. And I'm 49 years old, and I'm thinking, why am I 49 years old serving, waiting tables? But it's been one of the most wonderful experiences, even though I've traveled to 35 countries. Working at P.F. Chang's, I swear to you, is one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And I want to tell you, if I have time, I do, 3 stories of recognizing God at P.F. Chang's. I'm going to try to get through these stories because they always bring up some emotions. But it was New Year's Eve last year, and crazy busy. You know restaurants on New Year's Eve, you've got 2-hour waiting at the door. And I had this family at one of my tables. It was an elderly woman with her adult daughter and son-in-law. And I went to wait on them, greeted them, and the older lady said, I guess you're wondering why this extra hat is sitting here on the table. I didn't notice the hat, but I noticed that she wanted to talk. And I saw the hat, and I said, I was just about to ask you why that hat is sitting there. And she said that she and her husband used to go out every New Year's Eve together and celebrate. And she had just lost him a couple of months before. Yeah, sorry. Just thinking about it now. And she talked and talked and talked and told me his name. And you could see that when she said his name, she would smile. And it was just wonderful. And I went to my manager and I said, told him the story, and I said, what can I do? He said, this is what P.F. Chang's is about. Do whatever you want to do. So I went to the bar and got a bottle of champagne. And I took it to the table, of course, with 4 glasses. So that I could, celebrate with them. And we toasted the husband. And She loved it. She said that was the best New Year's Eve ever. And that made me feel good, you know? And I don't do things in order to make myself feel good. I want to know that I've made you feel good. But if I've made you feel good, that automatically makes me feel good. So what's going on there? It's the divinity, right? It's the oneness that flows through every single one of us. It's one thing. So if I make you feel good, I'm automatically making myself feel good because we're one. And it started clicking. It started making more sense. And I will say it's nothing that I do is ever about the money. But I've lived a life of scarcity. Working in Japan, making $65,000 a year, not being able to save it. Because I had a mentality of scarcity. I'm afraid that I'm not going to make my bills. I'm afraid that this can't happen. I'm afraid that I won't be able to do this. And so Wayne Dyer taught me that I was making myself poor because of that. I'm like, I chose to be poor? And Wayne Dyer basically said, yes, you did. And so it's not about the money, but it's about the openness. And when I opened up to this lady, the tip was wonderful. It was. And then later, when we had said goodbye, the husband, the son-in-law, came up to me and shook my hand and put another folded bill in my hand, doubling the tip that I got from them. And it's the icing on the cake. Because I quit this career, I'm serving tables now, and I'm paying for a doctorate, and I have more money in my bank account now than I did when I was living in Japan. Because I changed. I changed my thinking. I have to keep looking at the time because sometimes I ramble. Sorry. And then there was another day when it was a lunchtime this time, and it was a very, very slow day, and a group of women came in together. There were about 6 or 7 of them, laughing, hooting it up, just having a good time. And, you know, we always give fortune cookies at the end, and I'm discounted. And there was one fewer fortune cookie on the table than there was ladies. Than there were ladies. Sorry, I was an English teacher. There's always me when I mess up. But when I went to the table, all the other ladies said, she didn't get a fortune cookie. I'm like, don't go anywhere. And she's like, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I said, it matters to me. This is my home. This little section of tables is my home. And you can't go away without getting your fortune cookie. So I went back and I got one for her. And said goodbye to them, told them to have a nice weekend. And I was in the kitchen, and one of the servers came up and said, one of those ladies is out there asking for you. And you don't know me well enough, but my first thought is, oh crap, what did I do? Did I run their credit card wrong or something? It's like I knew that I made a mistake somehow or another. That's, something I've got to work through, but that's okay. But I went out there, and one of the ladies who was in the party, not the lady with the fortune cookie, but one of the other ones, said, I just want to thank you for giving her that fortune cookie. I'm like, we have drawers full of them. Why? And she said, this is another one that gets me, so I'm sorry. Again, she said that lady lost her husband a couple of months ago. And her fortune said that your best times are ahead of you. Yeah. Just a little piece of paper in a cookie that's just some sugar made her day. Made my day. And again, that's a connection that 22 years of teaching, I couldn't see. And I'm not saying that teaching doesn't have connections, because it does. But I wasn't in a place yet where I could see them. And now that I'm serving you chicken and rice, I can see them. And I feel like a king working in a restaurant. And it's just amazing to me. And another, a really quick story. This one is not as emotional, but it's just as wonderful. It was another lunch, and dead. It was one of those days where you maybe have 2 tables before you're cut and they tell you to go home for the day. And I think I made $18 that day. So it was like, okay, I'm going to go have lunch afterwards. I'm going to spend my tips and just have a nice meeting. But the table that I had, it was a mother and her daughter. The daughter was maybe 21, 22. We started talking, and she had her doctorate of divinity. How did those kinds of things happen, right? And so she was talking about her doctorate in divinity, and I'm talking about my doctorate in spiritual studies. And she starts acting weird, and she stares off over my shoulder and says, "I'm getting this feeling." And the daughter just rolls her eyes and she goes, "There she goes again." And I look at the daughter and I said, "What's happening here?" And she said, "Listen to what she's about to say, because 9 times out of 10 she's right." And she said, "I'm seeing you are going to be a speaker, but you're also going to be a writer as well." And I love writing. And when I had to write my dissertation, it was one of the most stressful things I've ever had to do. But once it started flowing, it was wonderful. A lot of the stories that I've told you this morning are in the dissertation. But she said, "I feel that you're going to make connections with your writing and with your speaking, and I see a lot of poetry, and I see a lot of talks about herbalism," which is what I studied when I lived in Japan many years ago. I'm like, how does she know all this? And she said, "And I also see you being successful in England." And my mouth is on the floor at this point, because one of my desires is to be in England. And it's like, how does she know this? And again, I'm like, she knows it because the spirit that's in her is the same as the spirit that's in me. It's one thing. It's one entity. I don't even know the word to use. It's just one. Oneness. And that's, I guess, what we call it at Unity. We call it, unity, right? Unity. And it's just a oneness of all life. And going back to that kid who was 2 years old when his parents got saved and started going to the Wesleyan church, that kid finally can understand what it means to have Jesus, to have God living in you, what we at Unity call the Christ consciousness. And Advent, I didn't grow up with Advent. I didn't even know what it was until I started meeting people from other faiths. But we have faith, peace, and love. And this is just all representing the Christ consciousness, the unity, the oneness of all life. And can you tell I get excited when I think about it? Yes. I feel like I stumble sometimes because there's just the thoughts and the feelings are so big. And the words sometimes aren't there. But it's just amazing to me. And so, does anybody know what Pinterest is? Yeah. I'm a Pinterest addict. On my phone, sometimes I'll just flip through it and look at all the cool pictures. But I saw one recently. Well, it could have been on Instagram, but I think it was on Pinterest. My friend Emily showed me, so if you're watching, you can tell me later what it is. But this is a really great idea, and it's something that I suggest that you all can do as well. It's you do it for different things, but I'm suggesting it to do it for oneness. You just have a big jar, and you have different colored paper, and every time you have what I call a miraculous experience, like the ones I described, those are miraculous, I think. If you have an experience, and I think colored paper, different colors of paper is fun because you're going to see this jar sitting in your house all year, so it might as well look pretty, right? So you can have different colored Post-it notes representing different things, like Blue is when I experience oneness with another person. Pink is when I experience oneness with plants. When I experience oneness with animals, that could be a different color. And another color can just be when I just get that overwhelming knowing or feeling that I am one with everything. Get the experience, get the coordinated piece of paper, write it down, fold it, and put it in your oneness jar. And how cool would that be on New Year's Eve? To sit down and open that jar and just read and remind yourself about all of those experiences of oneness that you have had throughout the year. Can you imagine what kind of a year you would have? Wouldn't it be awesome? So I saw it on Pinterest. And you know, a lot of the times you see the crafts on Pinterest and things like that. You think I'm going to do them, but then you think, oh, that's too much trouble. Yeah. I think I'm going to do it because it sounds really fun to me. And if you're just walking around your house, you don't have to read it, but you see that jar. And you see all the colored paper in it. And you just get that feeling again. It's like, we're one thing together. We're just one. We just look different. But we're different representations of God. That's pretty awesome. Thank you.